This is election 2020, New Mexico Senate District 38. I'm Fred Martino, KRWG Public Media and the League of Women Voters, pleased to present today's forum. The rules are simple. Candidates have up to 60 seconds to answer each question and should not mention their opponent in the answer. My co-host is League Co-President Eileen Van Wee, and we welcome candidates Carrie Hamblin and Charles Wendler. Thank you all for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Fred.
All right, Carrie, we begin with you for the first question. In what ways, if any, should the tax system in New Mexico be reformed? Explain.
Well, Fred and Eileen, we have a GRT, a gross receipts tax, rather than a sales tax, which means that taxes are issued on services as well as tangible goods. However, in our state, the rate of the GRT varies all around the state, and we need to revisit that to make it fair and equitable for everyone. But on the also is that GRTs are more favorable to large businesses rather than sole proprietors or small businesses. It's very harmful for startups as well. And given that we're going to be seeing more startups and entrepreneurial opportunities because of the business climate due to COVID, we are punishing those small businesses rather than having the appropriate tax schedule in place. What I would propose as Senator for District 38 and working with the legislature is to explore how our existing taxes are working and implement ways to maximize those for revenues and make sure that the tax schedule is fair to all.
Thank you. Chuck.
I think we need to do away with the Social Security tax. You know, that really penalizes our older folks who are on fixed incomes. For probably a significant number of people, that's their major source, if not their only source of income, Social Security. And that really deters people from out of state coming here and settling, which we could certainly use because our population growth is not doing what we'd like for it to do. 2.1 million people more or less. Gross receipts tax. Gross receipt tax is really a sales tax, but the gross receipt tax taxes businesses. And it's accumulative because with each subsequent layer of business within the vendors, it keeps adding on and on. So we need to do something definitely about the gross receipt tax. And yes, it does vary throughout the state. But then when the state legislature gave each municipality the authorization to increase taxes.
Thank you, Chuck. We're out of time. Eileen.
Oh, that was quick.
Well, Chuck, you have actually already answered this question, but I'll ask you to see if you want to expand on that answer. Should New Mexico continue to tax Social Security benefits, and explain?
Well, yes, I've already answered that. No, they should not tax Social Security. And I think I already explained that pretty well in my previous response. Yes,
okay. Thank you. Carrie, how would you respond to that?
Sure. Well, I think this is a complicated discussion because when Social Security benefits first became taxable, the change only affected the top 10% of retirees in terms of income earners. Now that number is nearly 60%. Social Security retirement benefits are taxable in New Mexico, but they are also partially deductible. Now, according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, taxes on Social Security benefits fall more heavily on high income than low income taxpayers. That's both because a larger share of benefits is taxable for higher income taxpayers and because they face higher marginal income tax rates. Now, what concerns me in New Mexico is that there are many, as it's been mentioned, that are living solely off of their Social Security and they depend on every penny they get. What I feel what we can do to help, as well as ensure that there's equity in the Social Security tax, is to help people understand where they can receive deductions on that tax, but also address the needs that they have regarding affording food, housing, medical, bills, and utilities.
Okay.
That's a bigger conversation to have.
Thank you, Carrie. Moving on now to education, and starting pay for teachers is nearly 20% lower in New Mexico as compared to districts in El Paso, which start at more than $50,000 a year. How do you assess efforts to make the state's salaries more competitive? Carrie?
Sure. While serving on the governing council for the J. Paul Taylor Academy, I learned of the salary schedules for teachers and saw how low our teachers are being paid. According to the Legislative Finance Committee, in 2018, Half of New Mexico teachers leave the profession within 5 years of graduating from educator preparation programs. And that intensifies the struggle across New Mexico to fill teacher vacancies. Now, with COVID, our teachers are stretched beyond their limits with remote learning and trying to keep kids engaged in extremely challenging circumstances. Fred, specifically, the starting salary in Texas is $52,750. Certified teachers in Las Cruces start at $41,000. That's about an $11,000 difference. We need to raise minimum salaries, provide stipends for classroom supplies, and recognize that local districts are doing their best to provide professional and psychological support during this time. But we need that at the state level. We also need to recognize they need more time to plan for their classrooms and reduce the excessive paperwork that takes a lot of time out of regular schedules. And then the challenges of adapting their teachers to students who have diverse learning needs. We need to recognize that as well.
Thank you. Chuck.
I'm all for everyone getting as much as they can when it comes to salaries. Okay, that being said, and I do want to emphasize that, every person has the right in our wonderful country to gain as much monetary compensation as they possibly can get legally. That being said, having been in the school business for 37 years and having been a chairperson of a charter school myself, I can assure you folks that there are more things, more caveats to this particular profession than just the money. And that is work conditions. Teachers' hands are being tied so much anymore that they're not able to do what they have been trained to do professionally. And that is a big thing about the work environment itself. We need to talk about the work environment. It's the money, yes, but what about the other conditions in a work environment? Making it favorable that people want to do this. I mean, people go into the teaching profession because they want to serve. They're basically public servants.
Thank you, Chuck. Eileen.
Chuck, are you satisfied with how much money was allocated to Early Childhood Trust Fund in the 2020 legislative session? And please explain your answer.
Well, I know that it was cut more than what had been originally requested. I think now it's making up about 2%. All in total, there's about 59% of the state's budget that goes to education one way or the other. K through 12, 45%, and then higher education, another 12, and then we get into early childhood, about 2%. You cannot get enough money for education, and that's one of the priorities that we have, is the education of our kids, education of the elder people as well too. But it's about prioritizing, and one of the things that I think very dearly is that parents are the first teachers. And I was a principal of a school where I had 12 full-time kindergarten teachers and I had 2 pre-K teachers. And we had Head Start beginning in 1965. What has been the success of Head Start? Have we not done enough research?
Thank you, Chuck. Carrie?
So to answer the question, if I'm satisfied with how much money was allocated to the Early Childhood Education Fund, no. I appreciate the creation of that, but I believe it was presented as a solution to undercutting our kids' education. In my work with the Leadership Circle and the Success Partnership, we know that when we shortchange our kids, especially when they're just creating their foundation for their school experience, we are damaging our state for years to come. And the rhetoric that's used on how we will damage our state's economic future if we touch the permanent fund is false. First off, that money belongs to the residents of the state. The Land Grant Permanent Fund is one of the largest funds of its kind in the country and provides more than $500 million in benefits to New Mexico's public schools, universities, and other beneficiaries. And of course, with the upcoming budget conversation that we're going to have with the legislature, we're going to be relying on that fund to help ease budget shortfalls. But what we need to do is we need to allocate 1% or more increase from the permanent fund to early childhood education. We can afford to do this, and we should act quickly on letting the voters of the state decide that.
Okay.
We are cheating the future of our kids because that fund is so high.
Thank you, Carrie. What actions do you support to improve the accessibility and quality of health care in New Mexico, if any? Carrie?
Oh, absolutely. Increasing transportation from the rural parts of our state so that our residents have access to health care and medical appointments is really important. We also need to increase pay for our specialists and doctors so that our residents don't have to spend money that they don't have on travel and accommodations to go to El Paso or Albuquerque or even Denver to get the health care that they deserve. And because of COVID, which is going to be with us for the foreseeable future, we need to support increased telemedicine opportunities for those who can't get to a doctor's appointment in person. But with all of this, Fred and Eileen, we are talking about improving and supporting education and the creation of jobs and economic development. We need to have statewide broadband, especially for the rural communities, in order to make this a reality.
Chuck?
Yes, I think one thing is we go back to education again. I think that we need to do more to teach people in general about good health practices, about healthy lifestyles. Having been a science teacher myself, I know that we don't spend sufficient amount of time about telling people about good health practices. So it comes to personal accountability, first of all, that we are doing the most that we can to take care of ourselves, okay? That being said, what about the insurance companies themselves? Last I heard, there was well over 300 insurance companies throughout the United States. How many are allowed to practice here in the state? Each state has its own insurance policies that mandate or regulate, I should say, I guess, the insurance companies that can practice within the state. So I would say that I think we need to do the free enterprise capitalistic system, if you will, to go ahead and open it up to more insurance.
Thank you, Chuck. Eileen?
Chuck, what should the legislature do to improve New Mexico's economy and ensure job growth?
Well, for one thing, they can do a taxpayer plan where the taxpayer's in charge. I know in Colorado, they passed a bill not very long ago that limited taxes. No more taxes can be raised unless it goes to the voters. That was an amendment, it was a constitutional amendment to put a ceiling on taxes. I think for one thing, that would be a strong signal to the economy here in our state that, because, they just keep raising taxes, and didn't want to attract businesses. Businesses are more apt to come into a state when they know that there's going to be a limit on taxes. So that would be one thing. And here's another thing too, the surplus that we did have, 2 years they raised the budget about 25%. I mean, the spending about 25%. That's a big tall order, is it not?
Thank you very much, Chuck. Carrie?
So I feel that we need to diversify our revenue streams with legalizing recreational cannabis, which I know I'll be able to talk more about in just a little bit. We also need to support our renewable energy jobs and training, which I'll also talk a lot about. But one of the things that we need to be able to make sure that's not only a policy but a value is to keep money in our state. We need to support local businesses, provide resources for entrepreneurship, and keep people from leaving our state to go and find employment elsewhere. I have the lovely honor of working with different agencies in the city to help support entrepreneurship, to help support our businesses in time of COVID with resources and access to support services that they need. And we need to keep that as a policy throughout the state. If we go outside the state to get goods and services, well, we need to cultivate those things here and have them thrive in our state. We need to think local first in many aspects as possible, and not just at the city and rural level, but at the state level too.
Carrie,
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Carrie, do you favor the legalization of recreational marijuana in New Mexico? Explain.
Of course I do. When we see programs and agencies across the state to have to cut their budgets because our state budget drops because of the dependence on oil and gas, we are foolish to not look at this opportunity. We have the chance to do it right. We have a chance to make sure it's not appealing to kids. We have the chance to create jobs in small businesses. In 2019, Colorado passed the $1 billion mark in revenues, contributing to the state's general reserve fund, as well as education and healthcare, mental health services, and youth drug prevention programs. Plus, with the legalization of recreational cannabis, we can stop incarcerating people of color for minor possession. According to the ACLU, the aggressive enforcement of marijuana possession laws needlessly ensnares hundreds of thousands of people in the criminal justice system. The war on marijuana is not working. We need to legalize it and regulate it and tax it so that our community can benefit how we choose.
Thank you. Chuck?
I'm against recreational marijuana, no question about it. Medicinal marijuana, I'm okay with that to alleviate pain and suffering. That's fine. I think we need to maybe explore that a little bit more. But recreational marijuana, having been a school principal for a number of years, 25 years, give or take, no, I can't go with that. And I'll tell you what, if you go and look at Colorado and look at some of the other states, if you get the statistics on what's a collateral damage, I might say, I think you'll find that recreational marijuana, why open a Pandora box? Okay, with alcohol, we have enough of that, do we not? And the businesses are going to be impacted big time. Our police, law enforcement is going to be impacted. The judiciary system is going to be impacted. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So why should we do that? It doesn't make sense to me at all. No, recreational marijuana, absolutely not.
Eileen.
Chuck, should it be legal in New Mexico for a physician to assist a patient in dying? And please explain your answer.
You know, I think that's a personal thing of families with your spiritual leader, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if someone's on life support, then I think, again, that's up to the family to decide on what to do in that case. But, you know, my faith would prevent me from getting much more involved in that. And the state certainly has no business being involved with that by regulating it all. And physicians are here to save lives. So that being said, I don't know what else I can say about that. No.
Carrie, what are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely feel that there should be physicians able to assist somebody to die with dignity. You know, terminally ill people should have that choice, not government, not politicians, not religious leaders. You know, last November, I had a dear friend of mine who was suffering horribly from a vicious disease, and she made the decision to die with dignity. And throughout her illness, she lost control of her body, her health, her life as she knew it, and her future. Her death was the one thing that she had control over. And so how dare we as a society push our values and beliefs on someone to live with suffering every day and who knows that their time is limited, and force them to continue to suffer because we don't think that they should have a say in how they live or die. We need to make sure the Elizabeth Whitfield End of Life Options Act passes so that our residents, if they choose, can die peacefully in their sleep and with dignity.
Thank you, Carrie.
Carrie, do you support any adjustments to current gun regulations? Explain.
Sure. I'm proud that I've received the 2020 Moms Demand Action Gun Sense candidate distinction. You know, I grew up around guns. My father and my brother were both avid gun owners, with shooting out on the gun range, reloading bullets in the garage, and even safely cleaning guns on the dining room table. And I remember my father taking me to shoot skeet the first time in my life at the age of 11 out at the gun club. Now, although I don't choose to own a gun, I believe that we have to fight for common sense gun safety measures that will help keep guns out of the hands of people who will do harm to themselves and others. Supporting background checks for all gun sales, I think it makes it harder for people who aren't allowed to get guns to get them. This is putting responsible gun owners under the microscope and getting them criticized because of the people who shouldn't have access to firearms. This isn't about gun control, it's about preventing gun violence in all its forms and encouraging gun safety and responsible gun ownership. And we need to continue to move forward with responsible gun legislation.
Chuck.
I think the Constitution, both the federal and the state Constitution, is extremely clear about guns. It says, shall not be infringed. Now, the words here are very critical. Shall not be infringed. I know that when my boss or my parents told me, shall you do this, that, it was very clear what I was to do. And so I think that we've got a situation here that is not ambiguous. It's very clear. We have the right to bear arms, period. Now, that being said, there are people that we need to be careful of. And there are already laws on the books that allow for that. But the red flag law, that was so unconstitutional what they did. So I hope that is going to be remedied.
Eileen.
Chuck, should New Mexico promote renewable energy? If so, how?
Well, yes, it should. I mean, we need to search out for all sources of energy. Energies are really are slaves, if I may use that word in the right context. I hope that's being used in the right context, because we use energy, electricity, they do work for us. Okay, so we need those sources to work for us. And renewable energy is very viable, particularly here in New Mexico. We got a lot of sunshine, and we've got a lot of wind, especially in the spring. We all know about that. That being said, I think we need to do those explorations, not at the expense of just literally obliterating what we already have, and to make the transition, which New Mexico is in the process of, is coming at a high cost that I don't think people are fully aware of. You need to research that, what's happening in the Four Corners area. And the people are being thrown out of work, coal and so on and so on. Natural gas up in the San Juan Basin is the largest deposit of natural gas in the country. And so
Thank you, Chuck. Kerry?
Sure. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, New Mexico is one of the top 3 in the nation with the best solar energy resources. And as CEO and president of the Las Cruces Green Chamber of Commerce, I've spent the last 8 years talking about the benefits of renewable energy. Not only about the benefits of using solar energy, but how that can help businesses reduce their costs and overhead. We have 350 days of sunshine a year, and that sun power is free. Now, we should be creating community solar projects for low income and rural communities. We should be providing resources for folks to be able to afford systems to help them cut their utility bills. And we should be supporting jobs in renewable energy. Displacement training for those businesses, those individuals who work in oil and gas as they move into a new economy. Now, we're hurting our planet, our economy, and our communities by not being more proactive in embracing renewable energy in our state. And I would encourage anything we can to increase that opportunity in New Mexico.
Kerry, what is the role of the state, if any, in abortion regulation?
The state has no role in regulating women's reproductive health. You know, the fact that we still have a 1969 law in the books that criminalizes women who choose to get abortions and those who provide them is a blatant disregard for women having a say in their health care. You know, and given the state of our nation and the possibility that Roe v. Wade could be overturned, should raise the alarm that women of our state will be under attack, and we as legislators need to do whatever we can to protect women in New Mexico. Now, it's not a decision made lightly, and in less than 1% of the cases where abortions are performed later in pregnancy, it's because there's something medically dangerous to either the mother or that pregnancy to continue. And what is a painful decision to even think about, there are conversations that should only be happening between a woman and her physician and not involve politicians or the state.
Chuck, your chance to answer this question. What is the role of the state, if any, in abortion regulation?
You know, I think the primary function of the government at any level is the protection of its citizens, of its people. You know, that baby in that womb is the most vulnerable. We talk about social justice, if I can use that word, which is very popular today. Social justice how does that resonate with that embryo inside the womb that is completely defenseless? Against abortion, yes, the 1969 law was there, and we're the late-term abortion capital of the world, in the United States, I should say at least. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we're not able to attract businesses here. When you have those kinds of laws to protect the innocent ones, and then we have Planned Parenthood coming in, and in my opinion, falsely saying it's for women's reproductive health. Well, yeah, I guess so. But that being said, I just can't go along with abortion from conception. You know, that egg and sperm, I taught that stuff in biology, okay?
Thank you very much, Chuck. And our final question now from Eileen. Eileen.
Chuck, do you favor an open primary as a way for independents and declined state voters to participate in primary elections? And please explain your answer.
Well, I think open primaries. We want so much to have people come out and vote. I mean, we really struggled. You know, I was chairman of the Advisory Election Council at the county clerk's office just a while back, and we worked very, very hard on increasing voter turnout across the board. That being said, and it's not about parties. As far as I'm concerned, it's really about the issues as we're discussing now. When you get into the party thing, you get into following the leader and so forth and so on. And I think it allows people to kind of stop thinking for themselves and looking at the party to decide what it is they're to follow, what to believe in, not to believe in, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm all for whatever we can do to get more people out to vote. If the open primaries will do that, then I think we should do that, okay?
Thank you, Chuck. Carrie, your thoughts?
Sure. I do believe that everyone should have a voice in who's going to represent them at both the local, state, and federal level. You know, the open primary allows nonpartisan or independent voters to participate in the nominating process. And if these voters are allowed to help select the nominees, they also may be more likely to vote in the general election. And since one of the candidates could be somebody a nonpartisan voter would vote for. And it encourages and regularly produces higher and more representative voter turnouts. It lets voters focus more on candidates' credentials and views on issues, and it opens the political process to minor party members and independents. And so I do believe that we need to have an open primary. And in my conversations with constituents, they want to have an open primary as well.
Carrie
Thank you,
Hamblin,
Carrie.
and thank you very much, Carrie. Carrie Hamblin and Charles Wendler are running in New Mexico Senate District 38, and Eileen Van Wee, co-president of the league, was my co-host. Thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you, Fred.
And thank
Thank
you
you.
at home for making public media possible for all of us at KRWG News. I'm Fred Martino. Have a good week and vote.